Hello, my name is Mickey Peters. Welcome back to the Upside of Authentic Leadership podcast. I'm really excited today to have Jacky Fischer, the CEO of Three Men Movers. And how I got to know Jacky was that number one, she came to my group and gave us a presentation, and really more of a workshop, I would call it, on her story of building Three Men Movers from really 10x on the revenues from roughly 3 million or more than 10x, 15x to over $40 million in revenues. And I also read her book, The Growth Paradox, which we'll talk about here. There you go. Here in more depth, but I definitely give the book two enthusiastic thumbs up, and really what I would call it is a book about building a business in the trenches, really how Jacky built her business and the challenges she faced, and really resonated with that as somebody who's also built a business. So really excited to have you here, Jacky. Welcome to the podcast. I guess the first question would be just to tell us a little bit about yourself and Three Men Movers.
Yeah, so my dad started the company in 1985, and he was one of those serial entrepreneurs who started a business, failed, scraped up some more money, started another business. And I think probably most entrepreneurs are like that in the United States. A lot of times we look at the ones that sell out and get investment money, but a lot of times it's these small guys that are just trying to make a buck. And that was my dad. And one of his businesses failed, and he was 50 years old, and he had a junky old delivery truck and bills to pay. And he put an ad in what was then called the Green Sheet, which I tell my young people in the audience is like Craigslist, but it was like a newspaper. And he put an ad in there for moving services, and he was going to do it for just a couple of months to make some money. And it ended up being a business that he was able to grow. But unfortunately, in 2002, he had a massive stroke, and that's where I came in. So he called me and got me involved in the business, and it was supposed to be for a few weeks, and it ended up being for about a year. And at the end of that year, I realized two things. And at the time, I was at University of Houston. I was an art major. And I learned two things that year. One, I absolutely love business. And two, I absolutely hated working for my dad because he was just really old school, super tough. And so after about a year, I gave him notice, and I said that I didn't want to work there anymore. And about a week after that happened, the drivers, they found out, the movers, and they took an invoice, a yellow invoice, and they wrote their name on the back of that invoice, and they gave it to my dad. And they said, "We want you to hire your daughter back." And I politely said, "No way," because he was tough. And then I said, "But I will come back if you sell the company to me." And that really worked out well for us because he didn't have the money for retiring yet. And so that allowed him to retire and be financially okay. And it allowed me to get a growing business. And I originally tried to get financing, but when you're 29 years old and you don't have a business education, and you only have a job. The only reason I had the job with Three Men Movers was because it was my dad's company. Nobody would have hired me with my experience level and background. But once I got that job, I realized I had to learn about business and learn really fast. And so I went about teaching myself everything I could about business. And that included many trips to the library, checking out financial statements for dummies and things like that. And then I joined Vistage. I spent 15 years in Vistage, and I went and got my Rice MBA. And so I feel like between the MBA, growing up in a family business, and Vistage, I had the best of three worlds. Because when you grow up in a family business, you learn how to be scrappy, and you learn how to sort of fight and struggle. And you also learn about customer experience and how important it is to be good to your customers. And then the MBA gives you more of a global approach of how to do things. And then my Vistage was so incredibly important to me because you can either spend 20 years trying to get experience and making a lot of mistakes, or surround yourself with other business leaders and learn from them. So that was a wonderful experience for me.
Awesome. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about Three Man Movers. How big are you today? Where are you located? And
Well, we do close to 40,000 jobs a year. We're located in Houston, Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio. And we have a storage container business as well called Move It. It's mobile storage. And the market's been kind of slow lately, but we're hanging in there, and we actually see year-over-year growth, but we're fighting for it every day. So I'm not your typical business book writer where I do a lot of like research and I'm in academia. I'm like down in the trenches every day, still making mistakes, still learning. So that's where my book comes from.
right. So what are roughly your annual revenues for Three Man Movers?
The annual revenues, we peaked at about 43 million. And then we shrunk back a bit because the interest rates dropped, and we were just shy of 40 million. So that's where we are about now. Hopefully we'll kind of make up some of that stride this year.
And when you took over from Dad, you were...
Oh yeah. So when I took over from my dad, we were roughly at 3 million in annual revenue. So we've grown quite a bit since then.
Quite a bit. How many employees do you have?
We have about 40 employees in the office, and then we have about 100 trucks out on the road with 3 guys in them. And our guys on the road are independent contractors.
And it's the name Three Man Movers.
Yes, absolutely.
So how did building your business from 3 to over $40 million, how did that change you?
I think at first it was all about the money, because I grew up very poor and I kept thinking about, like, how do I make more money? How do I make more money? And my focus was very driven on just surviving and paying off my parents. That was a huge stressful thing I had to do, because I mean, if I somehow sunk the business, not only did everyone lose their job, but my parents' retirement money would be gone, you know? So it was scary. It was a scary experience. I paid them off in 2019. So at first it was all about the money. And I remember early in my career, it actually was a guy in Vistage, and he said, you know, once you stop focusing on the money, you'll really start making strides. And I thought to myself at the time that he was crazy, because I was like, yeah, that's pretty easy for you to do when you have a company that's worth, you know, $100 million or whatever his company was worth. He was like the big shot in the room. And then as I started growing my business, I realized the more I focused on creating value for my employees and for my customers, the more money that I would make. And that seems to have worked out really well for me. And also, I think that when I first started, I learned my leadership style from my dad, for better or worse. But I had to develop my own leadership style, and it was very different from him. He was more of an authoritarian type leader, and I'm more of a nurturer. So, and my dad was a very nice guy. He would go through the ends of the earth to help somebody. I mean, he was always loaning people money and so forth, but he was tough, and he liked to yell very loudly. And I'm more of a peaceful person. So that style didn't really fit well for me. So I learned my own leadership style. And I think all business owners, or all people, should learn who they are and what is comfortable for them. And also to learn who they are and learn who they're not, because you want to hire people on your team that complement your weaknesses.
So you have to figure out who you really are. Yeah, that's great. So what was your motivation in Jacky in writing the book, The Growth Paradox?
Well, when I was in Vistage, I noticed that some businesses got stuck and some businesses grew really fast. And it seemed like the bigger the business, the less problems they had. And the smaller the business, the more they were putting out fires and running around. So like a company with maybe 8 employees, the guy was walking out in the hallway every 5 minutes on the phone with one of those 8 employees. And then you got another guy that had a couple hundred employees, and he was able to sit for 8 hours and work on high level strategy. And we all know, I heard this quote one time, I thought it was pretty funny, that business would be easy if you didn't have employees or customers. Because the more employees and customers you have, theoretically speaking, the more problems you should have. But this guy had hundreds of employees and probably thousands of customers, and he was as cool as a cucumber in the Vistage group. And I realized that there's a reason that people get stuck, and it's because they don't let go of control, and they don't know how to allow their people to work autonomously. And when I say that, I know we hear a lot of cliches like hire the best people and get out of their way, but there's a right way to do that. And the book kind of explains that. So I took 20 years of my business experience and my MBA and my tons of lessons I learned in Vistage, and I just wrote every single thing down that I wish somebody would have told me before I started my company, or when I was trying to grow my company. And then I created more of a guidebook or a workbook with exercises at the end of each chapter to help you structure your company and grow your company. So that's my motivation. My motivation, if businesses are run correctly, the owner is a lot more happier. They're not as stressed out. They're not running around working really, really hard and not making progress. And that can be very frustrating. And the employees are a lot happier too.
So you're thinking of paying it forward, making business owners less stressed and more happy, more.
Yeah. A lot of times people write books because they want speaking engagements or consulting fees. But I'm not a paid consultant, and I'm very shy. So getting up in front of a group of people, and I appreciate you letting me speak to your group. It was a very intimate setting, so that was really nice. But I'm not doing it for that. I'm really just doing it to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned in the intro, that your book is really about business in the trenches and your struggles and implementing some of those great ideas you heard in Vistage meetings or read about in the books you were checking out of the library. So I'm going to ask you about a few concepts, and so people can get a flavor for how you address some of the big ideas or big issues that all business owners face. So the first one is the importance, and you talked a little bit about that already, but the importance of empowering your team, letting them work autonomously, I think is how you put it.
Yeah, and so that was a huge epiphany for me, because when I first started off in business, I really hated having meetings. I was too busy running my business to sit and talk about running my business. I was busy like doing stuff. And it was like at this frantic pace as I was trying to figure this whole thing out. And so we would have a meeting every once in a while when things would build up and we needed to have a meeting and talk about something. And when we'd have that meeting, I would come to the meeting with a list of everything that we were going to talk about, that I was going to tell them. And during that meeting, I did most of the talking. They just sat there and took notes and listened. And I told everybody what needed to be done. And then after a while, I really hated going to the meetings. I thought this is so boring. And so I read that traction book. And I thought that was a really amazing book. And I feel like my book is almost kind of like a partner of that book, because it's kind of gives you a little bit more detail with some of the things, the concepts. But I was at a meeting and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna create an agenda and I'm gonna let them have the meeting themselves, because I knew that they really should be done weekly. And so I created an agenda and I said, hey, start the meeting without me, do the meeting on your own. And so the first time I got to the meeting, I was about 10 minutes late, because I was not the most accountable person. So I was 10 minutes late and everybody was sitting there talking, waiting. And then as soon as I came in, they all looked at me and they're like, okay, we're ready to begin. I said, no, if I'm late, just start without me. So after a few false starts, they started the meeting without me, and they started running the meeting all by themselves. They checked in, they had key indicators, they talked about issues, they processed issues, and they became like really engaged in the meeting. And the funny thing is that after that happened, I didn't want to miss any of the meetings. I'm like on time for all the meetings because I want to hear what's happening in my company, and I'm able to hear what's happening in each department from the front line instead of listening to my own voice yak. And I realized then that the meetings were all about me. If I was late, they started late. If I left early, they ended early. If I was on vacation, we didn't have a meeting. I set the agenda, I did all the talking. And once the meetings became about the company, that's when things really started to take off and grow. And it's so wonderful to just sit there and not say anything and watch everybody process issues and engage. And it makes for a better meeting for them because they're interested, they're able to participate. And sometimes I think as a business owner, you can kind of suck the oxygen out of a room. You go in and it kind of gives you a soapbox, and you're able to kind of talk and talk and talk, which, it's fine if you need to get a message across, but I think business owners who listen are far more effective.
Plus, you have better, more interesting meetings, so you get that side benefit. That's
Absolutely.
great. And kind of related to that, you mentioned the book about this idea of holding people accountable versus hiring accountable people.
Yeah. So the words holding accountable, they're oxymorons. So when you hold something, you support something. And when you want something to be accountable, you want something or someone to do something without the support of others. So the idea of holding somebody and allowing them to be accountable goes against each other. And so instead of holding people accountable, my opinion is try to hire accountable people. And even more importantly, get people who are not accountable off your team as quickly as possible. And it usually, that's the number one issue that we process at Vistage. I think if you probably took a poll of every single issue, and most of the time is, should I let this person go or not? And usually the answer is yes, let this person go. But why don't we do it? I mean, we sit up at night and we think about trying to pay them more money, or threatening them, or begging them to do their job, and maybe explaining to them the importance of how they fit in on the team. And we're thinking about bribing, begging, threatening an employee that's getting paid to do a job that they should be doing already. And so my theory is, and this is what I think about myself when I keep somebody too long, is you're either chicken shit, lazy, or delusional. And what I mean by that is usually when I'm holding somebody and I know they're not a long-term fit, either I'm afraid to fire them because even though they're not what I want, I'm afraid that the new person I hire could be worse. I'm lazy because, man, let's face it, I mean, the economy is tough right now, and trying to get out there and find somebody is really hard. And then you have to train them and give them all this historical knowledge, and it takes a while for them to kind of ramp up. It's a lot of hard work. Or I'm just plain delusional because the person won't have done a good job in like a couple of years. And then I think maybe next week they're finally going to get it. And that usually doesn't work out that way.
Yeah, you had these two categories, a mascot, and I'm forgetting the name of the other one. The mascot or the untouchable. Is that right?
Yeah. So you have your superstars, and then you have your wrong hires. This is on one of those four square charts, and on each corner you have your superstars and your wrong hires. And those people are so easy to manage. Your superstars, well, obviously you give them lots of attention and lots of love and lots of money, and you hope they stay with you forever. And these are accountable people. These are the people you don't have to beg, you don't have to bribe, you don't have to threaten. They come to work, they're ready to work. They don't complain about they don't have this and that. They figure it out. They're scrappy, they're hardworking. And unfortunately, we spend 80% of the time dealing with all the other people and not really working with the people that are these superstars because they don't really require a lot of attention. And then you have wrong hires, and these are people with bad attitudes and bad aptitudes. They can't do their job and they're not really nice. And when you get rid of them, people throw a party when they leave. Like nobody likes them, right? They're just really, think of like the DPS office, those people,
Right.
like you're there and they just really hate being there. They hate their job. But you just want like a living body sitting in a chair, those people. And then you have your untouchables who have high aptitude, but very bad attitudes. And usually if you're motivated by money, you kind of want to keep these people. Maybe they're the accountant that gets you your numbers on time, but they have a sign on the door saying, go away, don't bother me. Or maybe they're your star salesperson who refuses to come to any sales meeting or refuses to enter data in the CRM. And you're like, well, they're not following the process, but man, they are doing their job pretty well. And then you have your mascot, which has a high attitude, but a low aptitude. And these are people that are kind of the class favorite or the office favorite. And they're really loving and really wonderful and sweet, but they're just not getting their job done. And so you have choices. And I think with an untouchable, I don't believe in that word. I think that eventually it's going to kind of bite in the ass to keep somebody like this on your team. And I'm not saying go back to your office and fire the number one sales guy, but you should make a strategic plan to get somebody who hurts your core values, get them off your team. And then the mascot, if you have a place, maybe move them to a different seat. But everybody deserves to feel successful at work, and that goes for the mascot too. If he or she feels like they're never doing anything right or that they're not contributing, that's not a good feeling to have.
And so another concept that kind of fits in with everything you've just said, but you have a great way of explaining it. Everybody knows the term key performance indicator, but explain how you use that, put that into practice at Three Men Movers.
Yeah, so and I'm sorry I don't have a blackboard so I can draw my ugly charts because I'm not very good at drawing my charts, but I think your team understood. So I create a workflow process. And that workflow, if you're a service industry or a product, you're delivering a product or something of that nature, you start from the marketing part to where you get the first connection with the customer to where you either build or service the customer, and then the follow-up and all of that. So you draw a flow chart for your product or service. And when you do that, you attach a person to every part of the flow chart. Mm-hmm. And so every part of the process, one person in your company should be responsible for. Mm-hmm. And that stops the accountability delusion where when something goes wrong, you've got two people pointing at each other because mm-hmm. you have the buck stops with that one person. So marketing is handled by that marketing person. Incoming calls and the sales process is handled by the salesperson or the sales leader or manager. And you follow it through the whole thing, the whole process. And then what I do is I attach key indicators to each part of that process. And when I think about those key indicators, I think if I was like on a beach somewhere and I could only get 2 or 3 numbers from each department to know whether or not they were doing a good job, and that's all I could get, what would those 2 or 3 numbers be? And then I attach key indicators for each one of those departments and each one of those leaders of the departments. And that's how I do my key indicators. And it ensures that the whole process from start to finish is aligned with your core values of being whatever your core values are, efficient or customer friendly or whatever those core values are.
So you mentioned in the presentation last week about your drivers and how you have very low turnover in your drivers, which caught everybody's attention because you would think drivers of trucks you'd have, and movers, you'd have a lot of turnover. And the main reason that you mentioned was that they felt autonomous, that they were, and then you showed us their app. They had an app. I don't know if you have your phone with you, but they actually had an app.
I'll try to pull it up.
That they could look at and see how they were doing with the net. Was it the net? Your key KPI for them, the
Net promoter score.
net promoter score. Thank you. Yes, and I thought that was wow. Just I never would have thought that drivers would be motivated by autonomy. So that was a great story.
Well, I think a lot of times manual labor jobs, they're used to having some kind of tough guy on them all the time, kind of fussing at them. And I feel like if you create very clear boundaries of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and you have a way to measure it, you can let them do their thing. And you see that paper, that yellow paper right there?
I do.
That's actually the contract that the guys signed. My parents signed their name and they gave it to me, and I framed it and I have it on my wall. So every day when I come to my office, I can see that and I know who I work for, and I work for them. I work to make them successful. And here's their little app with their key indicators. This is just a sample of one of the guys, but for our guys, being on time is super important. And on-time score is important. Driver safety score is important. Customer reviews is important. So these are the things, and we have a couple other things that are DOT regulations, like they have to do a daily report and stuff for the Department of Motor Vehicles. But other than that, how they choose to get their work done is fine, but they have to be in uniform, they have to be on time, they have to get good reviews. And I really try not to bother them all the time. I give them the safety stuff they need once a month, but they're on their own. And some guys thrive in that and some guys don't. But usually it's a good position for them to be in. And a lot of the guys that sign that sheet of paper, they're either retired or they're still with me. So
yeah, that's a great unexpected upside of having KPIs, and then just whenever in your weekly meetings, looking at the KPIs, making sure they're in line. And
it's such an easy conversation to have too, because if a guy isn't doing what they're supposed to do, like I had this one guy, he was doing great everywhere else, but there's this like silly little report. I call it silly because I hate bureaucracy and forms and all of that. I guess it's important, but it's a report on like a daily inspection. You have to inspect your truck every day for the Department of Motor Vehicles. And this guy didn't want to do his report. And but he was getting good reviews and he was on time. And if you're monitoring these key indicators, your conversation can be very clear and very factual. This is part of your job. You either do this or you can't work with us anymore. The choice is really up to you. I mean, or if it's customer reviews, it's not me that doesn't want them to work for us. It's the customers. The customers are saying, you're not doing a good job. You can't work for us. I mean, these are the conversations you can have if you have really good numbers.
Yeah, that's great. So last question. I think this is for me personally that hit the hardest about this desire that we all have to be liked as people, but as a leader or business owner, you have to not give in to that urge to want to be liked.
I think that was one of the hardest things and I say hardest things to overcome. I still haven't 100% overcome it. I mean, this is part of human nature. And I talk about it in the book that your survival instinct is about fitting in with the tribe, about staying with the pack. And anytime somebody doesn't like you or something like that, you could get pushed out of the pack, and then you're on your own, and then like some big animal is going to eat you alive, right? So you want to fit in with the group. You wanted that pressure to be liked is so important, but when you're a business leader, sometimes you have to make decisions that are for the best of your company and decisions that people don't like. I know one of the big things now is coming back to the office and pulling, making people either work hybrid or making people stop working remote. And I know a lot of business leaders are struggling with it because they know it's important. They know what needs to be done, but they know it's going to piss off everybody in their company. So they're
Right.
kind of delaying this. I'm sure you've heard this, Mickey, right? And so
Sure.
what do you do? And it takes a lot of cojones. I think the guy from Chase Bank was like, the CEO from Chase Bank was like, or was it Chase? I think he was like, no, you have to come back in the office. This is part of our culture. Which, speaking on a side note, it really worries me. Not that, people our age, we can work from home. That's not a big deal. But these young kids, they need us. They need to be around people like us. They need to learn from us. And so that's
Mhm.
why I think coming back to the office is very important. I'm sorry, I took a left turn there.
It's
But
okay.
yeah.
No worries. Well, that's great. Is there anything that I missed or didn't ask you that you'd like to share about your book or concept?
Where you can get it. You can get it off Audible. So you can download it on Audible. It is not my voice, which could be a blessing. And you can also get it off Amazon.
Awesome. So please do go get the book. It was an easy read. I read it in a couple days. Because again, it's very raw, very real, and it's like you can relate to it. So you feel like almost you're reading a novel, right? About about something that you can, as a business leader, business owner, relate to, and be in Jacky's shoes and see how she dealt with things, and hopefully it'll help you deal with things and learn from her experience and her mistakes. So Jacky, thank you so much for sitting here for 30 plus minutes and answering these questions. I will be a big promoter of your book, as I've said. And so, yeah, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.